Hello everybody, Editor Kyle here. There was something in this video that I wanted to put in, but I forgot to do so I'm going to insert it right here in the beginning. We have a full audio recording available of myself and the artist for the game, Regimata, actually creating the character that we're going to be talking about as we talk about observing how fear is used in a tabletop role-playing game. If you're interested in us putting that somewhere for you to consume and enjoy at your leisure, please let me know in the comments below. Other than that, on to the video. Fear. It's one of the driving forces behind both human advancement and human destruction. It affects everything from our relationships to the ways that we interact with household items, pests, and even esoteric things. But today on Desks and Dorks, we are going to be talking all about fear, and more specifically, how it is used in A Fear Within Part 2. Hello everybody, I am Kyle Ott, I am the Dork. You are watching Desks and Dorks. Couple things. Usually I ask you to do all the YouTube pleasantries. However, I have one simple ask today. If you can, please click the QR code on your screen, or click the notify link in the description of this video to get notified for when A Fear Within, our new game, goes live on Kickstarter November 30th. It is the single best way to help both myself and the team, even if you are financially unable to back at this time. Just getting notified does bump us up in the Kickstarter algorithm, and it makes it more likely that we are seen by other individuals who might want to back our game. Of course, you can still do the YouTube pleasantries. I do appreciate that. And again, I'm actually going to plug the Discord one more time. If you want to join us and talk about role-playing games, game design, or you just want to talk about all kinds of things, you can do so there. But let's talk about what we are discussing today. I wanted to examine, of course, our core game mechanics, and specifically how they relate to fear. So I'm going to be talking about our upcoming title. I'm going to talk about its core mechanics, why those decisions were made. Selfishly, this is kind of a business decision as well. You get to see if this game is going to be worth it for you to back, and I want to present its concepts, obviously, as unbiased as I can. I'm the dude that made it, so, you should probably know that up front. But I want to do this because, A, you get to make an informed decision as a consumer. B, I get more content to feed the ever-expanding infinite YouTube wood chipper. And C, I actually do think it's interesting for those of you who are making your own role-playing games to have the curtain thrown back and have somebody else in the process of releasing a game talk to you about all of the ways that and all the things that go into creating a product. I think that's pretty interesting, and at the very least, I hope you all find it informative if you are somebody trying to design your own games. So, first things first, we have to talk about how die rolls work. In the last video, which will also be linked in the description below, we talked about the overall concept and that A Fear Within uses the simple and humble D8. But there's something we have to talk about first, and it's something that I believe very strongly in the role-playing games I design, and that is the rule of cool. For those of you who don't know what the rule of cool is, all it says is that if something is awesome, the players should at the very least get an opportunity to do it. Sometimes that opportunity is an automatic success, sometimes it's just the GM cracking their knuckles, having a big hefty sigh and saying, well, you can certainly try. So in A Fear Within, we use the rule of cool for quite a few things, but most of those things are basic stuff: climbing a ladder, sneaking down a hall versus a human opponent, making a sandwich. Essentially, all I wanted to do with A Fear Within was I wanted to use the rule of cool to make it so that basic activities didn't bog down the story. This is a one-shot or short campaign-focused role-playing game with a lot of player agency, and that means that I want to get all of the fluff out of the way so it's all killer, no filler, and that means I want little to nothing bogging down the core player experience. I want you fighting monsters, I want you delving into dark mysteries, I want you engaging with yourself, with your partner, yourself, the other players at the table. All of those things are core to the experience. Making you roll for little stuff, at least in my mind, is not. So you might be asking yourself, Kyle, what is the precious D8 for? Well, I will tell you, disembodied voice on the internet, the D8 is there to be used for when a player wants to push what they can do. So if they want to fight a really powerful person, tap into a computer network, disable CCTV cameras around a compound, all of those things are good examples for what a D8 would use. But what I think we did, what was interesting, was we split the value of this roll. And yeah, I had to put something in there to indicate rolling, so Of course I used a tire. Why not, right? So how does that work, and why would we split it? Well, let me tell you how it's split first so that you understand how the D8 roll function works. By the way, shout out to one of our fans. This is actually not done by Reggie. A fan submitted this art, emailed this to me last year at a convention. I asked him if I could use it for something else. He said absolutely. This is his concept for a child and the entity, which is that little shadow holding their hand, which I think is really cool. He said he was inspired by Little Nightmares. I really think this is neat, and I'll be honest, I can't tell you how moved I am, how appreciative I am to have fan art of something that I've made. Like, I don't know, it just feels like I've made it as a creator. So I'm just gonna put this in. Huge shout out to him. Thank you, my friend, for letting us use this. I really appreciate it. So the child, in order to succeed on a D8 roll, must roll their relationship value or higher. The entity must roll their relationship value or lower. Now that might be an odd distinction. Why would there be two different success conditions for the different sets of players at the table? And the one thing is, when we were designing this game, I was very intentional that I wanted the relationship between entity and child to feel contentious, which means that as the child grows to like and appreciate the entity, which means they have access to their power more, because in order to use the entity's abilities, they must get express permission from the child so that those powers can interact with the world, there would be a gameplay balancing effect for that, right? Obviously, if the child, or the player playing the child, I should say, gets more comfortable with their entity, it means they'll be able to use the power more often because they like each other just a little bit more. Again, it's that ludonarrative resonance that we talk about of the rules matching up with the story that we're trying to weave. In order to balance that out, that's why those die rolls work the way that they do. But also, I wanted there to be some tension. I think when you are playing this game, in particular at least, one of the things that we noticed was our playtesters really became super chummy with each other really, really, really quickly, which I'm okay with, right? This is a game about people individualizing and actualizing their own fears, interacting with them in some healthy ways, and using those healthy ways to punch giant monsters in the face, or sometimes avoid dying horrifically. That's awesome. However, I wanted there to be some tension. You have to have some skin in the game. The more your relationships get tweaked, the harder it is for some of the roles to actually go your way. And I really do like that, and it has actually borne out to be a pretty interesting decision when our playtesters got a hold of it. It's something that I continue to hold is a very core part of the game, and I think it's at the very least interesting and worth mentioning here. But we have to talk about powers, and for this one, I am going to use our friends Loose and Billboard Bob. But before we get into that, I need to tell you the most and important and core aspect of character creation, and that it is interconnected. Character creation in A Fear Within is designed to be a two-way street, a talk, a conversation, a process of communication by you and your partner, whether you're the entity or the child, and playing with an entity or a child in game. And this is really why I wanted to talk about fears in specifically for this video, in specific I should say, for this video, because I think ultimately when we are building compelling role-playing game characters, fear is often one of the driving motivators, and I think it's one of the easiest ways to build pathos and understanding when you're making a compelling role-playing character in general. So let's talk about how to make a kid first. Everybody, this is Loose, and steps 1 and 2 for the child are connected to steps 1 and 2 for their entity. So just for you, Loose is a character who is forced to go on long-distance road trips as a result of family trouble. But over the course of those road trips, Loose has begun to really fear fast-moving cars, bright lights, loud sounds, and most importantly, Loose is terrified of those dead deer on the sides of the road. If you're like me and you live in Appalachia, you might know exactly what I'm talking about. It is hunting season, friends, and that means that, guess what? There are a ton of dead deer on the road, and I remember as a kid being traumatized a little bit by that. Seeing Bambi laid out flat and disintegrated by an oncoming Mack truck is not something that you forget anytime soon, and Loose is no exception. Again, her fear are those bright lights, those loud noises, and most importantly, the dead deer on the road. And like many kids, Loose actually sits back, and as she does a road trip, I'm sure many of you who are listening or watching this have had a similar core experience. You have probably imagined a person or a creature running alongside your car, hopping along the telephone poles, running along the wires, skating along that little guardrail on the side of the road. All of those things are core to Loose's being, and all of them relate to Billboard Bob. You see, Luce has actually given life to those dead deer on the side of the road. The collective consciousness, the spirit of those creatures in her mind has twisted, warped, and altered to become Billboard Bob, a creature that she sees on every passing billboard, a creature which in Luce's mind and thus in reality has actually devoured the man running alongside her car and replaced them entirely. So you can see how we've connected the fear and background of Billboard Bob to Luce's character. And again, this means that we are going to have some really good, genuine fuel for role-playing when we get there. But I want to talk about the limitation, because a limitation is really important. If you watch a wonderful GDC talk, which if editor Kyle remembers, he will link in the description below, by Mark Rosewater, who's the head designer of Magic, he talks a lot about how limitations are actually kind of freeing when you're designing a game. It forces you to think creatively and forces you to find unique solutions to problems. And oftentimes, a unique solution to a problem is far better and far more compelling and intriguing than all of the infinite resources in the world. And I wanted to bake that core concept in, and I wanted to relate it to fear, to dread, to those most basic of human emotions. So, because we are operating under child logic, it's very simple. Luce is not afraid of loud noises, of cars, of the dead deer in the places that she is familiar with. Like most children, Luce takes comfort in the familiar and in the routine. And that means that Billboard Bob's immense power really only works in places that Luce feels safest in. So Bob over there has a very routine and very natural, shall we say, incentive to keep Luce stagnant. Bob's power is a literal reflection of the phenomenon of deer in the headlights. Bob's eyes light up, and when that happens, Bob dilates time, essentially trapping someone in his gaze as long as they're trapped in his headlights. He literally turns people into the deer in the headlights. I love this character so much. I really, really, really do. And again, he's able to hold more individuals, more powerful individuals for longer lengths of time in those areas where Luce feels comfortable. And that ties us in to the two most important things about both entity and child characters in A Fear Within, and that is theme and hunger. You see, this is a game based on and using all kinds of archetypal adventure movies like The Goonies or Stand By Me or It, or series like Stranger Things. And if you watch those shows as much as I did, or if you're a fan of those kinds of shows like I am, you'll realize pretty quickly that there are kind of themes that need to happen. Nowhere is this more clear, by the way, than a wonderful movie called Breakfast Club, where each of those characters needs to actualize and face some part of their lives, some facet of their own characters, to become the people they need to be so that they can move forward. A theme is a need that the child has to hopefully accomplish by the end of the game. A hunger, on the other hand, is an all-consuming desire. That is the one thing that keeps the entity in check and potentially stops them from being either useful, helpful, or could even transform them into a danger if role played correctly. Hunger is a driving desire, and for Luce, she needs to break free. Luce is a character who has been not just fractured and damaged by the constant change that she has to go through in her family life, hence those long road trips that have sort of started to eat away at her ability to focus, eat away at her ability to want to go outside. But in order for her to truly grow as a person, she does need to change. She needs to face those fears head on, meet new friends, travel to new places, and hopefully take the experiences that she gains and becomes a new person. But again, the reason we bake hunger and theme together, and the reason I want to connect character creation in the way that I do, is because Bob needs to keep Luce stagnant. Her stasis, her inability to change, is literally the thing that sustains him as an entity. This means that despite being on the same side, fighting against the fear, we have baked in quite a lot of, shall we say, I don't know, dynamite fuses into the story for these two characters to work with. And that's ultimately why I wanted to talk about fear with you all today. I really do think that baking conflict into your character creation process, baking conflict into the way that you start your games and the way that you help your friends to make their characters, I think, is not just a core design interest, but I do actually think is one of the most important and critical things that you can do. It's something I would really encourage new and even experienced designers to start doing a little bit more in your games, because I really do think it leads to some compelling and dynamic role-playing for your players and to some interesting challenges for your game masters. It's actually part of the reason that I'm making this video series, other than the fact that I want you guys to get to know your game and I get to talk about it with you, which honestly is kind of the best part about this channel, is getting to talk about game design. So now, I'm going to move on really quick. Some of you might have seen this illustration, and this just goes to show how far Bob is willing to manipulate events to keep loose under his evil, spectral hoof. Couple things before we finish up for today. How do powers impact die rolls? Some of you might be saying, well, Kyle, these are really interesting, but you talked about rule of cool, and then you talked about die rolls. How do our powers use these? If you've been following us for any length of time, I think combat should feel like a puzzle, games should feel like a puzzle, and so using your powers in creative ways allows you to either plead your case to your GM, or gives the GM discretion to give you advantage on die rolls, which for the uninitiated is when you make you roll with 2 dice, you pick whichever one you'd like. Bonuses, so positive or negative, depending on the needs of the character, the ability to treat situations as rule of cool when they otherwise wouldn't be, or even access to narrative opportunities in situations they would otherwise miss. My number one watchword is this, for A Fear Within 2, and of course for every other game that you play. Please, 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 like a good Sabrina Carpenter song, allow your players, if you're a GM, to use their powers to break situations. And players, one of the things that I love most as a GM is when you take the opportunity to use your powers in new and creative ways that challenge what I thought was going to happen in the story and challenge the thing that I have constructed for you to play in. Literally nothing makes me happier than watching you all do that. And that is what this system is truly about. And ultimately, I think what good systems based on fear are about, because again, if you have fear in your life, there's a chance that you are going to interact with things that cause you fear, or react to things that cause you fear in ways that are unpredictable, and in some cases, incredibly innovative. Ultimately, that brings us to the end of our video today. I really do appreciate you all sticking around to hear me talk a little bit about design, about dynamic character creation, and how fear plays a role, not just in our game, but in RPGs in general. Again, number one thing that you can do to help us out, you can get notified on the link on the description below, or if you've got your phone out and you're watching this, I know I watch YouTube videos with my phone out all the time, you can of course use the QR code that you're seeing right now on your screen to get notified when the Kickstarter goes live on November 30th. Join the Discord, do all the YouTube pleasantries as well, but even if you don't do any of those, thank you so much for sticking around, for giving me the chance to talk about game design, and honestly too guys, we're over 6K subscribers. What a crazy milestone for us who are like 200 subscribers at November of last year. This is truly just like an incredible blessing, and I'm very, very grateful for it. Thank you all so much for sticking around. But until next time, I am Kyle from Desks and Dorks. I'll see you in the next one. Peace.